I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. Hope you had yourself a great week. Hope harvest is progressing nicely. Hopefully those yields are above your expectations. Even if they are a little bit low on the expectation front, hopefully it's all working out. And we'll put 2023 behind us, get the harvest done, and then let the rain come. One can only hope. Well, here today on RealAg on the Weekend, we're going to go in a number of different directions, you could say. We're going to hear from Christine Lewington. She's with PIP-International. Now, this is they built a plant processing facility, a pea plant, that was a brewery in Lethbridge, Alberta, and they've converted it, renovated, so to speak, and have built a protein plant. And very fascinating, and we're going to talk to her about the why of it and what she sees as the future of plant proteins from her perspective. We're going to hear from Lena Bioni. She is with New Holland. New Holland at the Farm Progress Show in August unveiled a new electric utility tractor. So smaller unit, used lots around the farmyard, very, very handy when it comes to things like livestock and chores. And they've got an electric unit that they feel measures up to some of its diesel counterparts. So we'll hear all about that. Maybe you got some thoughts and some feedback on that as well. We'll also hear from Dr. Joy Agnew of Olds College. Kara Oostros of RealAgriculture.com had a chance to talk to her at AgSmart back in August. And Dr. Agnew has some thoughts about some of the misconceptions out there on greenhouse gases and how some of it, we need some better math. Yeah, better math, not new math. Have you ever tried to do new math with your kid? Yeah, not fun. This is just better math, period, in terms of some of the tracking. Because if you're not tracking something, it's hard to set up the expectations for success. And there's people throwing around a lot of numbers in terms of targets. Policies are being developed based on those targets, based on no math and how to properly track some of this stuff. And it's just adding up to a bit of a mess, to be honest with you. So we'll hear from Dr. Agnew on that. Hey, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms as Real Agriculture, or you're always welcome to call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. You dial that number, you press the number 3, and you leave me a message. You don't need to come live on the air. We won't do that to you, and won't make you do that. You just got to leave me a voicemail. So please do that. Always enjoy your feedback. This week, the Bank of Canada made a decision about interest rates and left it at 5%. Now, the pause may not be a forever pause. Now, the Bank of Canada in 2023 has paused before and then raised in the subsequent month. So this doesn't mean that we're stopping here. I did see JP Gervais of Farm Credit Canada. He believes that maybe the signs are there that we may be near the top or at the top of interest rate increases. Others disagree. Thursday, Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem spoke at the Calgary Chamber of Commerce meeting and was rather hawkish in some of his terms. It kind of gave the impression that we are not really done at this point. Now, I'm putting words in his mouth, but that was some of the perceptions that people had that heard the speech. I think yesterday on RealAg Radio, Calvin Hepner said, hawkishly holding, I think is how he phrased that. So we'll see where rates go. Of course, there's a lot of debt out there in farm country, and everyone's watching this. Real Agri Studies, which is the market research arm of Real Agriculture, recently asked farmers across Canada about their concerns over inflation. So overall, how concerned are you about inflation? And 51% said extremely concerned, 43% said somewhat concerned, 1% said not concerned at all, and there's a little bit more in the middle of all that, but some people not concerned about inflation. We also asked the Canadian government policy whether Canadian government policy has contributed to inflation. 66% of you across Canada, farmers and ranchers across this country saying, yes, completely agree. The Canadian government has led us down this path, which has forced the Bank of Canada to try to combat some of that inflation. The reality is, though, that, of course, inflation is something that is being is showing impact in a lot of different countries. So more to break down on this for sure. We're going to have more of that study out next week, so please stay tuned for that. Let's take a break. We'll be right back with more of RealAg on the Weekend with 650 CKOM and 980 CGME.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
You know, there's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from realagriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
Welcome back to RealAg on the Weekend. Well, you know, there's a lot of high expectations when it comes to the plant protein industry, not only in Saskatchewan, but across Canada and beyond. And there's the production, but there's also the processing. Okay, there's a lot of threats to production, like things like root rot, areas like that. But when it comes to processing, we're always trying to increase the depth, or the scale of the industry when it comes to that part of the value chain. Well, in Lethbridge, Alberta, a brewery has been converted into a plant processing plant. Let's find out about it. We're joined right now by Christine Lewington. She is CEO and founder of PIP-International, based in Lethbridge, Alberta. Christine, great to chat with you.
Hey, great to chat with you too, Shaun.
Okay, so what is PIP-International? Well, I know where you are because I used to drink beer there all the time. The building was no longer a brewery, and now what's going on inside those walls?
Well, we decided that we'd turn it into something else. And so what we do over here is we take protein out of peas. So instead of taking grains and turning it into brewery, lovely brew, we take peas and turn them into protein.
Okay, and what's we hear a lot right now about pulse proteins, and a lot of times when we talk about plant proteins, people focus on like Beyond Meat, but that whole industry is much bigger than just one company. What is your play in this sector?
So we are a B2B play. What that means is we're going to sell an ingredient. So we would sell the ingredient to Beyond Meat, and they would turn it into their beef patties, and they'd use it as that base. So that's where we play. But right now, our focus isn't the alternative meats. It's alternative dairies. So, ice cream and yogurts and fortifying, plant-based milks right now that don't have a very high nutritional quality. We have a vegan fudge that's to die for, and we have our lovely ice cream. So we've gone and done a lot of product development. And because our protein is extremely high functioning, we don't damage it through the process like all the other processes do, and it's tasteless. It brings on the flavors of that, what the scientist or the product developer wants it to be. So it's a true plant-based, choice that tastes good, which is fantastic.
So what kind of pulse crops are you buying?
Yellow peas. We're starting off there. Our process can do fava, chickpea, soy, but we're starting off with yellow peas because we got a lot of them around here.
There is absolutely there is. So, talk about the process without kind of going way over top of our heads, but try to explain the process to us in terms of what you're doing.
So, a few decades ago, some lovely folks across the ocean figured out how to take starch and fiber out of yellow peas and pulses in general, and they take the starch and fiber out to make their noodles. And then in the waste was left protein. And then they discovered they could dry that, and then they'd have protein. That's how all the other processes are. our process actually focuses on extracting and taking out the protein, and then our waste is the starch and fiber. So we kind of turned it on its head. And by doing that, we actually can really take care of that protein. It doesn't get beat up and heated and go through a lot of pipes and turns and twists that it doesn't need to, because the proteins are very much divas. They don't like to be damaged, and they like to have their Medi Spa just the way it should be. So that would be the difference. Is that if a high enough level for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we think about alternative dairy, like you were mentioning, there is a lot of focus that happens in terms of alternative proteins, meat, beef and chicken and those kinds of products. But for alternative dairy, how big is the market currently, and what are some of the growth prospects out there? What have you been hearing from some of the companies you're working with?
Oh, we actually last Thursday had one of the largest ingredient food companies in the world fly in, all four of them, their VP and their three top directors, to come and meet with us and to see the plant. And they're in the alternative dairy space. And it's pretty exciting. We have a few others that are multinational and global companies. And it's a multi-billion-dollar company with our industry with double-digit CAGR, so double-digit growth. And what they're finding is, as long as they can provide the consumer with a very good tasting, because consumers are tired of bad tasting alternatives. So as long as they can provide the consumer with a very good tasting product, the consumers will try it again. And that's why they've come to PIP.
Yeah, I was interviewing somebody about the plant protein sector. It's going back a couple months ago. And they talked about there needs to be that next generation of SKUs, that next generation of product development, because there's there is an element of people that, like, there are some protein bars that my wife will eat that I will never open.
Yep, I won't eat them either. Right? My husband will eat them. I will not eat them.
Okay. So there's an element of people that will push themselves just because they want to consume certain products. But in order to really grow the market and the business, you kind of gotta. You got to be a little bit more appealing to regular people from a taste component. So that's really where this industry needs to take that next step.
Well, they call it the second moment of truth. So food manufacturers say consumers need to pass the second moment of truth. The first moment of truth, there isn't one. It's just a choice. So it can be made on marketing or hype or, some kind of a, reason or cause you'll buy something. But unless that consumer chooses to buy it the second time, that product will eventually fail. It usually has a 14-month time span on the shelf, and the product will fail because consumers aren't buying it the second time. So it's that second moment of truth, and it all comes down to taste is king. Taste and texture, those two things, but its taste is number one. And so that next generation, I've even been told we have the next generation on taste parity, but what PIP has done, we've taken it to the next generation of cost parity, because that's the other thing. Consumers don't want to pay 4x for a plant option, and so PIP has been able to do some very interesting things, and we have price parity with the traditional choices and offering that to the food manufacturers. So those two things are what we're banking on, is really going to bring that next generation to the industry and really disrupt it.
Is the industry also dealing with, like, I know that at times we've had different products. My daughter is celiac, okay? So we have had, and
so is my mom.
Yeah, we had a bunch of different products come through the house. And what I find, or what is frustrating to me, is it's sort of like the frustration I have with, like, turkey burgers. Okay, I've ordered a turkey burger, but then the restaurant proceeds to load it with so much salt, I might as well just had other options that were on the menu. And I find this is the same in this category, that a lot of times there's a lot of stuff that is packed in, that's added, that is, sort of that filler. Is that something that the industry is kind of changing longer term too, or not?
Yeah, and they're calling it now moving towards the clean label. So I personally call some of that other food frankenfood, because I can't even pronounce what's on the label. So it's a bit of a frankenfood. Now, it was there to cut the trail and to blaze the trail, to say that there could be options in the future. Consumers are now demanding that they should be able to read the label, understand the label, and know where that food comes from, right? So that's huge now as it comes down through. And the food manufacturers that we're meeting with face to face are saying we want to be less than 4 ingredients or 5 ingredients. And so these damaged proteins, and I know way more about proteins now, and your daughter is celiac, this is where it all bases on the food. So, the bread tastes like cardboard, or, it doesn't feel right. That's because the protein isn't binding and gelling. And so they're going to have to, get a cellulose or another enzyme in there. So they have to keep packing it with all these different things. And they're packing it with salt and taste masking ingredients as well. And some of those things are what you can't actually read on the label to try to mask the bad taste of the current plant proteins that are out there. So all of that mixed in together, we kind of have to put that aside and say, how do we do it cleaner and with a higher functioning protein? And that's what we're bringing to the industry. And your daughter would, my mom loves it. I'm sure your daughter would love it. Our protein, we had some dignitaries over from across the sea, and we have our pizza oven here from the previous brewery, and we did plant-based pizza dough, and we did make your own pizza for their lunch, and it was phenomenal. They loved it, and they couldn't believe that we'd made it out of our protein.
Very, very cool. Is there anything unique about PIP International's process of creating the product?
Unique as in the sense that we've switched it up, but we've added 17 innovations versus current industry practice. So I guess there's quite a bit that's different to it. We use a lot less water. We are using 100% green energy. By next June, we'll use 100% green energy to heat and power. And through the process, we don't have some of those really astringent chemicals and enzymes and defoamers that everybody else has. So it just allows our protein to be that much more close to natural state when it comes out. So I would say we do have quite a few differences between the other. But like, you can drive a Porsche, you can drive a Maserati, you can drive a Ford. They're all vehicles, but which one is going to get you there better? And I think the consumer's asking for a better vehicle in this aspect. So
Christine, why Lethbridge? Why did PIP International retrofit this building that used to be a brewery in Lethbridge? Why Lethbridge?
Well, I grew up in Southern Alberta, so I know the area very well. I did site selection for a few years, and Lethbridge has, that movie Field of Dreams, Build It and They Will Come. Well, the city of Lethbridge, I don't know how many years ago it was, 15, 17 years ago, upgraded their wastewater system and their water treatment plant, and they have some of the best water in all of Canada, and they have abundance of it. And they have upgraded their industrial park, is what they call it, where you can build big plants and land inside a city limit. And there's so many advantages, when it comes to insurance and access to people and everything else, Lethbridge checks all the boxes, and the cost for land was down. So, and saying that, we are in the heart of yellow peas. And so distance to my raw peas. So it really checked many, many of those boxes. And I, have a couple of granddaughters that live here, and that doesn't hurt to have me want to have it here. That's just a bonus. But, this is the place to do it. We have 120 food plants in the area. So getting, skilled labor and maintenance and contractors that know how to work in the food industry, because it's much different than oil and gas. They're already here and skilled. So it's hard enough to be an entrepreneur and to try to bring something to market. I firmly believe put it where there's others that can support you and get it. So that's why I left Lethbridge.
There was Christine Lewington of PIP International, of course, a brewery, Coulee Brew, being converted into a plant processing plant. Interesting to follow that one as its growth continues. We'll be right back here on RealAg on the weekend, of course, on 980 CGME and 650 CQOM.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
The next generation is the future of agriculture, but how do we launch from one role to leading? From succession planning and family dynamics to understanding finances and making the tough calls to discovering paths others have taken all through agriculture, the Successors Podcast covers it all. Tune in with me, your host, Kara Oosterhuis, simply by searching The Successors on your favorite podcast platform, or you can find it by visiting www.realagriculture.com.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
Welcome back to RealAg on the weekend. I think there's, it depends where you're coming from, but I think there's anticipation of what the electrification of tractors could look like. I think a lot of times we jump to talking about this from a four-wheel drive perspective because it shows a lot of the barriers. But what about smaller utility tractors? There's way more of them sold. They're way more common. They actually have more of a fit too, or more of a wider application when it comes to things like the urban environment in a city, but they're used heavily, of course, on the farm as well, especially around the farmyard where they could be plugged in on a regular basis. Well, New Holland has a new electric utility tractor out. They talked about it at the Farm Progress Show, and Real Agriculture's own Bern Tobin caught up with New Holland to talk about it. Here's that discussion.
Today, we're talking machinery. We are going to plug you into New Holland's new all-electric utility tractor. The company rolled out its T4 electric power tractor this week at the Farm Progress Show in Decatur, Illinois. And to tell us all about it, I am now joined by New Holland product manager Lena Bioni. Hi, Lena. Hey, thanks for stopping by.
Hey, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here and to talk about electrification on the farm.
Awesome. Hey, a lot of the conversation this week was about this tractor being a game changer, effectively creating a new class of tractors. How does it do that, and what's the impact?
Absolutely. So we really are the industry's first all-electric utility tractor with autonomous features, and we launched that tractor this week at Farm Progress Show in Decatur, Illinois, to the public. For that reason, we don't have any competition that we can really compare this tractor to and how it works. But what we can do is we can start to talk to the agricultural community and let them know the benefits of electrification on the farm. With the T4 electric power, you can expect up to 56% operational cost savings. So you've got less maintenance because we no longer have the need to change oil filters, to change engine oil. We've completely removed the need for diesel and diesel exhaust fluid. So our operators are now able to spend less time doing maintenance and more time out operating.
Hey, tell us more about the horsepower, Lena, and where you feel the tractor fits on North American farms.
Yeah. Clean power does not mean less power. We have been able to completely match the outputs of power from its diesel equivalent tractor in our utility lineup of tractor series. We're able to achieve 74 engine horsepower and 65 PTO horsepower. So truly does fit in that utility tractor class. And we see this all across North America. Every farm in North America has the need for a utility tractor. Specifically, this tractor comes standard from the factory with a loader on it. So we know that this tractor is going to be highly used around the barnyard, inside of barns, dairy and livestock facilities, equine facilities, but also municipalities have a big interest in this electric vehicle because they can do things like mow in their parks where we're not disturbing any athletic activities or family outings. They can also do some maintenance around residential communities and not have to worry about disrupting or noise ordinances in towns as well.
Now, what's the size of that engine? Is it a 75 horsepower or thereabouts?
Yeah, correct. So we've got a 400-volt architecture of the electric motor and that battery's high-voltage components. With it, we're able to achieve 95 kilowatt hours of usable energy.
Right. So, hey, let's look a little closer at the technology here. You know, the T4 electric power comes with, as you say, a lithium-ion battery pack. And how much power can it carry, and how much work can it do before you have to recharge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as I said, we've got 95 kilowatt hours of usable energy for the tractor. So it all depends on what the tractor is doing, what the demand is on it, or how many hours of operation a user can see. On average, we say about 4 hours of runtime. And again, it all depends on what's happening. If you're doing something that's a little bit lighter in demand on the tractor, like loader work or pulling a rake, you can see upwards of a full days of operation. And if we are doing something really demanding, like baling or anything that's ground engaging, we have the opportunity to achieve a full day of work by utilizing a DC fast charger, which will allow the tractor to recharge in just 1 hour.
Right. So, hey, let's talk more about recharging. A big question, obviously, from farmers. What do farmers need to know about, and how long does it take?
Yeah. So with that DC fast charger, you can charge in just 1 hour. At the show, you might have noticed that we had a 220 volt charger, so that's pretty plug and play for us. Most farms and homes are equipped to run a 220 volt charger, so we pull 80 amps on that charger, and that takes about 8 hours to charge. So run that tractor during the day, plug it in at night, and you'll be ready to go for the next morning.
Awesome. Hey, I want to switch gears here and talk autonomy. You have a lot of autonomous features here. What were farmers most interested this week at Farm Progress?
Mm-hmm. So around the roof line of the tractor and also on the front of the tractor and the rear, there are cameras and sensors. So we've got 360 awareness the entire way around this utility tractor. Number one, safety is a big thing that comes into play. If anything were to come into contact or come into the area of an engaged PTO, that sensor will notice it and will shut that PTO down for safety features. As we get into farms that maybe have less skilled operators, especially on large production farms where operators are not as skilled anymore, big safety features there, as well as some additional features like using those cameras in the roof line and the front of the tractor to basically make the bucket on the loader virtually invisible. So you will be able to look right past the loader. There's a 14-inch touchscreen display inside of the cab that will then show you what is beyond your bucket. So for anyone who's loading a mixer wagon, doesn't want to hit the side, make sure they've cleared it, they're over the top of it. Great visibility, along with some other driver-assisted features that will continue to roll out here as we get ready to make these commercially available to our customers.
Yeah, and Lena, that's my final question. What about availability? When can we expect to see the T4 electric power tractor on farms in North America?
Sure. We will be taking orders for these T4 electric power tractors in October of this year. So we are 1 month away from order writing. And then we will continue in production of those and make deliveries in late Q1 of 2024.
Great stuff. Well, Lena, hey, really appreciate you telling the story of the electric tractor. Pretty exciting. Thanks for making time for Real Agriculture.
You can find out more about New Holland's diving into the utility tractor market with electric power by going to RealAgriculture.com. That story is in the machinery section. There's some pictures there. I encourage you to check it out. I also encourage you to send me your feedback. What do you think about this? Do you think there's more application for electrification of horsepower in the area of things like utility tractors than, say, going with the big boys, like, say, a four-wheel drive? I would think so. Look what's happened in the lawnmower. It's hard to find a gas-powered lawnmower nowadays. They're all electric. Weed whipper, electric, right? Smaller engines, just like utility tractors. We're plugging them in more often. It's easy. We don't need to worry about going dead in the middle of the day and having to be down for 4 hours while the battery charges. There's also a cost based on the number of batteries or lack of number of batteries that are required for smaller horsepower units. Or we just want to avoid the topic altogether. Like you're the guy driving 500 miles to go find the gas-powered lawnmower. Let me know. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or you can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. By the way, I still have a gas-powered lawnmower, but those electric ones, look, my dad's got an electric one. It's pretty darn cool. So let me know. Send me that email or call that RealAg feedback line. Let's take a break. We'll be back with more here of RealAg on the weekend. Of course, we're on 980 CGME and 650 CKOM.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Smith of RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern for The Agronomists, Canada's only live, interactive, agronomy-based show. Each week, we answer your most pressing questions with a rotating panel of agronomists, researchers, and extension staff from across Canada. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, or head to realagriculture.com/live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg on the weekend. You know, there's a lot of discussion right now in the province about greenhouse gas emissions. And we hear phrases like carbon sequestration, we hear about emissions. It seems we have a hard time getting everybody on the same page in terms of how all the math adds up and what some of the policies should be in order to deter or encourage either of those, depending on where you sit on this equation. Well, at the AgSmart conference at Olds College back in August, Carrie Oosterhuis of Real Agriculture had a chance to catch up with Dr. Joy Agnew of Olds College to talk about the misconceptions around greenhouse gas.
Hey, Carrie Oosterhuis here with RealAgriculture.com. I'm here today at AgSmart in Olds, Alberta, and I have here with me Dr. Joy Agnew, who is the VP of Research at Olds College. How's it going today?
It is going fantastic. Day one of AgSmart. It's always exciting.
Absolutely, and I guess I should say now Olds College of Agriculture and Technology. You guys have recently added that to your list,
yes.
So absolutely great things going on here. Now, you just spoke about greenhouse gas emissions and, you know, some of the misconceptions when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that?
Sure, yeah. And specifically, I was talking about greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture and overall, I guess, carbon footprint of ag, because there is two sides to that equation. There's the emissions side, which everyone seems to be talking about and worried about. There's also the carbon uptake or sequestration that is happening annually and seasonally within ag. And that number also needs to be well understood and well calculated and measured to do a proper net balance or a net footprint calculation. And that's a huge gap right now. We have relatively good numbers on knowing what the emissions in ag are, but not so much on the uptake side. And so if we're going to be focused on, you know, hitting a target of net zero by whatever year, 2050, we need to know how to measure the full footprint, including sequestration.
So talk about the differences between the two and what they mean.
So emissions is basically the contribution of greenhouse gases, so carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide are the three main ones. The contributions of that to the overall atmosphere. But uptake or sequestration is the removal of carbon dioxide in various forms, mainly carbon, into various ways. And the main one in ag is in soil. So soil is pulling in carbon dioxide and various forms of carbon and locking it in basically into organic matter and the other parts of the soil structure. I'm not a soil scientist, but there's a massive potential for carbon uptake into the soil, and we just don't have a good handle on how to measure that or monitor that over time.
So by not having a good handle on that, talk about how that impacts measuring our carbon footprint.
Well, it basically makes it impossible or really inaccurate, I guess, because they're two very critical pieces to that calculation: emissions minus uptake or sequestration. And if our goal again is net zero, that net implies that we need both sides to that. So if we don't know how to monitor if we've been successful or not in meeting a net zero target, then how can we incentivize? How can we talk to both the ag and the non-ag community about the footprint of ag if we can't measure it?
Yeah, absolutely. And talk a bit about what practices are out there for producers to actually make this somewhat possible, maybe.
Yeah, too many to count, unfortunately, or actually fortunately, because there's a broad number or a huge number of practices on both sides that'll boost sequestration and reduce emissions. And fortunately, a lot of them aren't going to inhibit productivity or profitability. They actually add to that. So that's a good thing. The challenging thing is that not every practice is going to be applicable or have the same impact on every farm. So there needs to be a lot of information about enhanced efficiency fertilizers, or the impact of variable rate, or the impact of algae feed additives to reduce methane emissions from livestock. There's all of these different practices that we need to quantify what the potential impact can be on, and then which farms and farming systems and climates they're best suited for.
And talk about shifting this mindset between, we're going, okay, these practices are great for the environment, great for the farm, but they actually bring profitability.
They do, yeah. The vast majority of them are all about finding efficiencies in a major input like fertilizer, right? So if we can grow as much or more with less fertilizer because we're using it more efficiently, it's a win-win on both sides because it's reduced input cost and a reduced carbon footprint. And that's not always clear, I guess, when you're talking about targets and mandates to reduce emissions. But that is the reality for the vast majority of practices that boost sequestration and reduce emissions.
And now the key to this, of course, we can talk about all the practices out there, but we have to adopt them. What have you found in your research drives adoption?
Oh, there's many, many different factors that drive adoption or actually hinder adoption is probably the easier way to say that because of the various surveys and the way the data has been collected. But it's primarily price point or return on investment. There has to be a positive impact on the bottom line to the farm, and there has to be some assurance that it's going to work for them on their farm. Because, like I said, Canadian ag is so diverse. A practice that works really well in the east may not work in the west and vice versa. So there has to be good information on return on investment and good information on the applicability in that specific growing zone.
And there are some incentives out there such as off-calf, those sorts of things. Do you think incentives are enough to increase adoption?
Maybe, maybe not. So based on looking at historical information like adoption of a well-established best practice here in Western Canada, conservation tillage, there was all kinds of different programs and different ways to gather or get information into the hands of producers, and then also an incentive program that was launched in Alberta but not Saskatchewan, and the adoption rates between Alberta and Saskatchewan didn't differ. So was that because the incentive didn't make an impact, or was there other factors at play? Don't know for sure, but we do know that adoption rate timeline, that 30 years that it took to get from 0% adoption to 80% adoption of conservation tillage, we need to do something to shrink that if we're going to meet our emission reduction targets and enhance productivity targets. And what that is, it's probably not incentives alone, but we've got to be addressing all of the barriers to adoption that are there, not just price.
That was Dr. Joy Agnew of Olds College talking to RealAgriculture.com's Kara Oosterhuis. Dr. Agnew makes a very good point. You have to know not only what you're measuring, but how you're going to measure it to really have some sort of, establishment of what success actually is. And it seems in this topic, so many people have jumped ahead to whether, what we need to do in order to claim victory, that we don't even have any of the math figured out. And this rolls very, very tightly into some of the challenges that I have when it comes to carbon border adjustments, where we're going to place trade tariffs on countries for incoming goods based on math that doesn't really exist in either example in terms of how every country is going to do the math differently is what I'm trying to tell you. And so which really creates some massive, massive challenges. So some great thoughts there. You can see that video by going to RealAgriculture.com. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776 6147. I want to thank everybody for joining us here for Real Ag on the weekend on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. Cheers.